Yeah. Hey, y'all, so excited that you are here. Guess what? I have a special treat today, which I have been more excited about than a lot of things in a while. This is Tia Smith, and she actually lives close by. We met playing pickleball, do you think a year or two ago?
Probably about.
Yeah, it's been a while. And she was really awesome at pickleball, but that's not her best quality.
Better.
No, that's not her best quality. But so she put a book out recently. Was it a couple months ago?
It was in February.
February.
Yeah.
And as soon as she put it out, I bought it. And then I bought one for all of my sisters. So I'll have her talk about her book. But the main thing that I learned from her book was the one that my takeaway was to start recording my personal revelation that I received each day. And I think you do it all day long, but I basically have the capacity right now to do it in the morning. I have some quiet time and I just record what's coming to my head that I feel like is coming from Heavenly Father. And it's made a huge difference. Like, I am so glad I bought your book. So
thank you.
Basically, Tia's here to talk about anything she wants to talk about. We've had a conversation before. I felt inspired in my daily revelation to call her and ask her to be on the podcast, and she agreed. So super excited to hear your story or about your book, whatever you think, Tia.
Well, this is a new experience for me, obviously. And the book thing came out of nowhere for me. It's not like I have, I'm not trained. I'm not college educated. I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. And so I feel like the book was, when the prophet has said, if you don't like going to the temple, then go more often. It was one of those acts of faith where if you want to have more faith, then you need to do something that would force you to have more faith. And just a little background about me, and because this is a marriage podcast, I thought that I would probably put in a little bit of pre-information so that you kind of know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm the oldest of 7, and my parents got married, and then at the age of 9, they divorced, and it wasn't a very nice one. Needless to say, it took a long time, and even is still kind of, I don't think that you can go through something like that and not have residual effects from it.
Right.
My dad married a total of 7 times, which so like my idea of marriage was skewed in so many different ways, right? And I went to college, I met and married someone in 6 months. I was 18 at the time, and he returned missionary, doing all the things. And then we had an experience in our life that really changed the trajectory of everything, of our marriage, of like just how we were going to live. In 1994, he worked for a chemical company, and he was asked to go into a vat of nitric acid and turn the acid off, the valve off, so that it wouldn't cause catastrophic problems.
Yeah.
Anyways, so he went in there and ended up burning his legs and is 35% disabled. Went to a burn unit. And that started this journey of, we had a little boy at the time, and it started this journey of this marriage of, like that I wasn't expecting, right? You get married and it's going to, you think, look a certain way.
Yes. Especially because you married the right one.
Right.
And obviously your parents didn't, but you did.
Exactly. And so it started this journey of addiction. And because at the time, the doctors just handed out pain pills like candy. It was just what they did. It was a kind of a thing that was the main treatment.
Yeah. And burns hurt really bad.
Really bad.
Really bad.
And it was so bad. Like, I was his nurse at the time. we'd have to change his dressings twice a day, and every expletive that you can imagine. It was just so painful, so many surgeries. But what happened was, and we had only been married probably a year and a half at the time,
Oh my word.
where I started, he completely changed, obviously, with the experience and the drugs.
Mhm.
And then I think that I became like a wife of the addiction,
Mhm.
and not necessarily to my husband per se, because he wasn't the same person, and I wasn't the same person. So you're newly married, you're trying to figure this thing out, you just had a baby, and then all of a sudden addiction gets thrown into it. And you try to navigate that as much as possible, but addiction is a tricky thing where it's just hard to be real with each other, I think. And the reality of the relationship is the addiction. Like everything always goes back to that.
Right.
And as much as you try to, make it about something else, it never is and never will be. And it was about 15 years of that. And
Are
it
you
was,
kidding?
no, well, I think even more, actually. There's probably more than that. But for some reason I have in my mind 15, but I think it was more like actually 20. But it was just, and it got to a point to where we were so dysfunctional in so many ways. And we had tried, like, you try to do things that better your marriage, and you try to do all the things, but really when it comes down to it, the only one in that situation, I believe, that could help was God. And I think sometimes we take out of that relationship, we take God out of it. Right. And we think, I've got to solve her problem. Yeah. And I've got to, like, but you don't have the power to.
It's too big.
It's too big, and it's too much. And so I got to the point where I was like, okay, I think I'm done. Like, I can't do this anymore. It was just becoming a lot for him and a lot for me. And so this kind of begins my journey of revelation, because before then I was just winging it,
surviving,
right? And
surviving,
this whole
I'm
idea,
sure.
and I think that's where we sit, is that our whole idea of revelation is this kind of ethereal, like, okay, I got to hear him, but it was not something that I understood. Right. I didn't get it.
I didn't either, for a very long time.
And you're in the thralls of motherhood, and you're in the thralls of parenting, and you're trying to just survive and figure your life out. And I got to the point where I needed to hear his voice on this thing in particular, because it's a pretty major thing to decide, right? So I remember getting a blessing, from my dad. He's passed away, and that's why this is far. But I got a blessing from my dad, and in the blessing he said, you need to ask your Father in heaven what you need to do in this situation. And he had his own opinion on what should happen. Everyone around us had their own opinions of what should happen, right? Yeah. But they don't have the eternal knowledge that God has, or the foreknowledge of what can happen and what's possible. So I remember going, okay, but I don't know if I really even would understand the answer. Right. But so after I kneeled down, and I felt like I prepared enough. I felt like I did everything, checked all the boxes. And I kneeled down and I prayed, and I asked Heavenly Father, what was supposed to happen? What he would say that I needed to do in this situation. And I was completely open to whatever the answer was, but I was pretty sure that I knew what the answer was going to be,
which is leave, right?
Leave, right. Yeah. Or whatever, or choose to go a different way. Right. And he said to me, very clearly, that you need to stay. And I remember going, what? Yeah. Are you kidding? Like, I have all of these reasons, and he has all of these reasons, and we have all of these reasons. And sometimes I think that receiving revelation is the easier part than actually doing it. What you've been told. I totally agree. Especially if it goes against what you think that you should do. Right?
And what would be the easier? I mean, it seems easier. It seems easier at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought, well, that was surprising to me, to say the least. Yeah. And but do I believe in God? do I believe what he says or not?
Mhm.
My whole life, I've been raised in the gospel, and my
Mhm.
whole life I've been taught that God knows, that God will help you, and all of
Mhm.
those things.
Mhm.
But when you get down to the brass tacks of
Right,
everything, do
right.
you really believe that?
Mhm.
And I really had to sit in it for a little while and go, okay, what do I believe? And then I decided, okay, well then God's just going to make it all okay,
Mhm.
right? If he
Yeah,
told me
if
to
he made,
stay,
he's making me stay,
right,
he's gonna fix it all.
right. He's going to fix me. He's going
Right.
to fix him. We're
Right.
all just going to be
Uh-huh.
happy. And I just felt like that was what was going to happen. Well, the opposite happened. And the surprising thing about the whole thing was that he started teaching me through little ways, and still I was not understanding revelation. I
Mhm.
know what I had gotten because it was
Mhm.
so clear that you
Right.
couldn't not
Mhm.
understand it. But he started changing me. And I thought, oh, what?
Right. He's the one with
He's
the problem.
the problem.
That was me too.
Right? And so he started softening my heart and really showing me ways that I could be a wife to my husband
Mhm.
and not a wife to the addiction,
Mhm.
or however. And I started really recognizing the positive things that he was doing instead of
Mhm.
focusing on every little single
Right.
thing that compounded into this big
Right.
thing. And I was surprised about that.
Mhm.
And I don't know why I was surprised, but I was definitely like, okay, but I was open to the change, because if he said it,
Right.
then
It must be
it
right.
must be right.
Mhm.
And so, working through this, it started kind of softening my husband's heart a little bit, because I
Mhm.
wasn't like on his case, or I
Mhm.
wasn't like reacting to
Mhm.
whatever the addiction was, whatever was happening
Mhm.
that day. And I started seeing this kind of beautiful dance. And it's one thing when you include the Lord in your relationship,
Mhm.
that's when the miracles really start to happen.
Yeah,
Right.
I
And
totally agree too.
I just feel like that sometimes we don't give him the space
Mhm.
in our relationships to teach, and we're not open to whatever the answer is.
Yeah.
We feel like it should be a certain way, and everyone's telling us it should be a certain way,
Mhm.
but God's ways are not our ways. And
That's for sure.
we can't know what the end is from the beginning unless we include him. Did it make everything perfect? No. It's been a long road
Mhm.
back. There's been several experiences. And one of the things that the Lord really put into my place, and it was kind of through an Alma the Younger experience.
Mhm.
One of the things that he had that I wasn't doing at the time was I wasn't doing regular temple attendance.
Mhm.
Like the temple wasn't even really a part of my life.
Mhm.
I was mothering. And I may not even been worthy at that time to go to the temple,
Mhm.
or whatever the case may
Mhm.
be. But it was a huge near death. Well, it actually wasn't a near death experience. It was actually a lady passing away in front of our eyes, in our arms. And we had this miraculous experience where both of our hearts and spirits were touched through this lady that we only knew for a split second, because she passed quickly in my arms. And I remember that night, the ambulance people were concerned
Mhm.
because they're like, it's a traumatic experience.
Right. To have
And
someone die.
yeah, to have someone die. And it wasn't like, it was like a gravel truck hitting this little Honda. I mean,
Mhm.
it was just so bad in so many ways.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I'm sure I'm fine. But I went home that night and I was sitting on the couch, and all of a sudden, like this flood of just trauma came
Mhm.
up. And I'm sitting there crying, and very, very specifically, I felt at this time her arms around me.
The lady who
The
died.
lady who died.
Mhm.
Her name was Luann Claire Hyde Meekum. And she was just like, and the story still goes on even 6
Mhm.
months ago. But
Mhm.
what happened was she put her arms around me and she said, you need to get back to the temple.
Hmm.
And I remember telling Darren that, and he's like, what? because at that time, the idea of that was so far away,
Mhm.
right? And so I made the changes that needed to be, that needed to happen for me in my
Mhm.
life. And I went back to the temple, and I promised the Lord that if I would go once a week, that somehow the promise that he had made to me, you know, a while ago
Mhm.
about staying and that things would work out,
Mhm.
that if I did that, then he in some way, whatever, how he does it, would make the relationship okay. And it was hard. It was hard at the time. And you know, he wasn't necessarily on board with it, but
Was it just you or him?
it was just me
Just
at
you,
the
okay.
time.
Mhm.
And I said, we need to get back to the
Right.
temple, but I can't make decisions, right?
right.
I mean, that's just,
Allowing adults to be adults. That's one of the things I teach.
yeah, exactly. But I knew, and as I went back to the temple, I started having these really cool experiences with the veil being thin. And I started noticing the power that comes from that and the change that was coming from that. And his heart was changing and my heart was changing. And, you know, here we sit today. Actually, tomorrow will be our 31st wedding anniversary.
That is something to celebrate.
Especially in
where
my
you've
family.
been. Right.
It's kind of like, this is like, it's kind of like, oh, I'm like killing it in my family. But like, so, but it, you know, and people listening who know me may go, well, I know their relationship isn't perfect. And I 100%
Right.
totally agree, but there is absolutely no way for it to be perfect because
Right.
he's not perfect and I'm not perfect.
Right.
But that promise and that revelation that I received so many years ago is playing itself out because of the trust and the faith that I had in that instant and moment, and the change that I have experienced and that he has experienced through it. So I just, but here's the thing, if you don't get your errand from the Lord, you're not going to know what to do.
Right.
Right. And my answer may not be the same
Right.
for someone else's situation.
Yeah. I always coach people who are having marriage issues and they're like, what should I do? And I say, I have no idea. You
Right.
and God need to figure out what you need to do. Because I would never know what you're supposed to do.
And I think the hard part is that we go around asking other people's opinions, right?
Like, here's an expert.
Right.
What should I do?
What should I do?
Yeah.
But in reality, the only one that has full knowledge of the situation, both him and you, because you don't want just
your perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the only one is God.
And he's the only one with the eternal perspective.
Exactly.
The long game instead of right now,
Yeah.
which is all we see.
Yeah.
Like today, yesterday, you know,
it's true. It's true. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that, especially in our world today, where we want to have instant fix, right? We want this to be instantly fixed. We want this to be instantly okay. We want them to instantly change. But in reality, it is eternal. Yeah. This is an eternal striving that we're involved in. And we can't just fix it in a week or a day, but it can be fixed. Yeah. That's the good news.
And I do think, like, for me, it was almost 20 years of some struggle, right?
Absolutely.
Like you, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, it's going to take another 20 to fix this.
Yeah.
But I think that Satan's lies and limiting beliefs are way less powerful than God's.
Right.
So I think when we do his way, God's way, it's 100 times more powerful. And we don't need years and years and years to heal this. Do you feel like that?
No, totally. And that was the surprising thing for me, is that when I made that choice, and it is my choice, and I made it, and it was my walk with God, really, in trusting that. And I honestly thought, I don't know how this is going to get fixed. There's been so many things that have happened.
That's how
I don't even know who he is. He doesn't even know who I am, because when you're married, the addiction is the common denominator. Right. Even if I'm not addicted, I'm still in that relationship. Right.
Yep.
So, but the miracle of all is that he did fix it, and he is fixing it, and he is helping him and I to become the eternal beings that we have always been. But we lose sight of that.
Yeah, when we get smashed down enough in this life.
Yeah.
right?
It's
When enough
exhausting.
stuff- Oh, it's so exhausting.
I just think, really, like, we came down here and we said we wanted to do this, like.
I don't think we had a clue what we were
We
signing
had
up
no
for.
clue.
No.
We had no clue.
Mm-mm.
But as I walked, part of that walk with God then at that point was figuring out Revelation better.
So show them your book for a sec.
Okay,
So
this
tell them a
is-
little bit about this.
Okay, that's right. Sorry, I'm not good at this.
There you go. Yep.
Patterns of Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
So this was another interesting thing, is that I started trying to study and understand Revelation better, because
That's the key.
it's the key. And I
Mhm.
started having these experiences in the temple,
Mm-hmm.
even outside the temple, where the veil was becoming thin.
Mm-hmm.
And, at first I was like, am I crazy? And I always tell them, so I teach institute, and I always tell my students, I'm like,
Mhm.
the minute you start saying, am I crazy? I'm like, you're on the right path.
Yes, exactly.
You're on the right path. So I just had been studying for so long, and I was having these experiences, and I was seeing God's hand, and I was trusting and having faith. But I still was not getting the full grasp of this revelation thing. And so my husband and I started studying Revelation, anything we could get our hands on. Scriptures, prophets, books,
Conference talk,
like just everything.
Mhm.
Right. And I started noticing that there was a pattern. And during this time, when I was listening to something, it came out that, and it was a pattern in the scriptures. That's the thing I love about patterns, first of all, is that they're always going to work.
Right.
They never deviate.
If you can figure it out.
If you can figure out the equation or the
Mhm.
formula
Mhm.
or whatever, that
I
it
believe
will
that.
always work.
Mhm.
And you can take stock in that and have faith in that.
Right.
And so I literally would get up every morning and read through the scriptures. And I had this like list of like writing things down and this and that. And I would write the scriptures that I had found related to that. And it was a black notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I started doing that, one of the things that kept coming up was the writing of something down. And I went, that's just really,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that was one of the parts, because most of us are doing
Mm-hmm. That was the
rest
huge,
of the things.
yes, that
right?
was the huge thing I was
Yeah.
missing.
There was a couple of things that I was missing. I wasn't giving time to hear the Lord.
Me neither. That's the
I
other
wasn't
one.
listening.
That was me too.
I was just thinking it was going to come in some
way,
some form.
But you talk the whole time during your prayer.
Exactly.
You
don't stop
no.
to listen. And then it was the recording. And what I quickly realized, that when it said in the scriptures, and the voice of the Lord came unto me saying,
Mm-hmm.
that's someone hearing God's voice and writing it down.
Yeah.
That's what scriptures are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started going, wow, this is crazy. So I started writing down every little impression, because the question is it my thought?
Right.
Or is it from God?
Right.
Or is it whatever? And, I heard someone, it was very simplified for me. And they said, well, usually you're in your mind thinking, I'm going to do this, or should I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Satan, a lot of the times I'll know a prompting from the railing against it. So a lot of times you have this prompting, go help someone with the dishes, or go do the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a prompting? And I thought, well, yeah, because it's prompting you to do something good, because in the scriptures, anything good comes from God.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's prompting you to do something good, then that's God's voice.
Mm-hmm.
So I started writing down everything. Like, I had the impression today to take someone flowers, or I had the impression today to say hi to someone, or whatever the case may be. And it was very kind of cumbersome in the beginning.
Right. Kind of like weight loss, and you're supposed to write down everything you eat.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. But the promise says, right, this is part of the pattern. And so as I started doing that, when you start doing that, you start hearing the cadence of the Lord's voice. And there's a cadence to Revelation. And as you write it down, you're also telling the Lord, it matters what you say to me.
Right.
I'm going to write it down. And as I started writing it down, I started getting more. revelation. And pretty soon sentences would form, paragraphs would form, and then like in a 15-minute span, I'd have 5 minutes of, or 5 pages of revelation.
Mhm.
And the first time that happened to me, I remember I was kneeling down, I was praying, I had stopped and taken some time to let God speak to me if there was something that needed to be said. And I had a paper and pen by my bed with the intent that if he was to give me something,
You would be
I
ready.
would be ready.
Mhm.
And that's, bless her soul, Sister Nelson.
Right.
I mean, she has revealed the pattern
Mhm.
that the prophet receives revelation.
Yes.
He keeps a notepad
Right. by
and a
his bed.
lighted pen by his bed, in case it comes in the middle of the night, because a lot of times it will come
That's
in
what
the
I
middle
feel.
of the night.
And I have a thought about that. And I think it's when we're finally still.
Still,
We're finally
Yes.
still, right?
yeah, we're taking the time where we haven't all of these other thoughts are invading our minds.
Right.
We're actually letting the Holy Ghost like
Mhm.
give him a second to speak to us.
Mhm.
And I believe, because you don't just get words. I've had dreams, and a lot of this has to do with family history, and I'll get to that in a second. But the first time that happened, I just sat there crying because there was like 3 paragraphs. And my husband was kind of watching me. He was in the bed
Mhm.
next to me, just kind of watching what was happening. And he looked at me and he said, "What just happened?" And I said, "I don't know, but holy cow." And when I read back what had been written, it sounded like scripture.
And it didn't come from you.
No, heck no. People
Yeah.
people that know me know, I mean, I have
Mhm.
special words when I say when I play pickleball. It's not, I am not like a trained scriptorian
Right,
or whatever
right.
the case may be. And I knew it was from him, and it was doctrine, and it was related to me, very
Mhm.
specific instructions to my situation.
Mhm.
And it was eye-opening for me. And as soon as I kind of unlocked that gate, it's kind of one of those, Elder McConkie describes it this way. It's like tuning into a radio station. Once you can get the station,
Mhm.
you can tune to it every time.
Mhm.
But it's just getting to that station
That makes sense.
to know where the cadence is coming from.
Mhm.
In fact, I have experiences where I know that it's coming.
Mhm.
And I'll be driving and I'm
Mhm.
like, hold on a second, I
Mhm.
gotta pull over.
Mhm.
And so I type it into my phone, I'm
Mhm.
like in Mountain America Credit Union parking
Mhm.
lot,
Right.
typing revelation down.
I've
just-
done voice memos where I'll just hit voice memo and I'll just start talking.
That voice memo scare me. I don't know how to do that.
Oh, I have
Maybe
to show
need
you
teach
after
me.
this.
Okay.
Okay. We'll
I'm
go.
so
You came here for me, so I'll voice
Okay.
memo for you.
got
Yeah.
it. That's awesome. But that's the cool thing, is that then you have a record of it.
Mhm.
And then the even cooler thing
And if you
is
don't get it down, it's gone.
you're not
Have
gonna
you
notice
noticed?
it.
And
You
it doesn't
swear.
come back.
No. And you swear in the moment, there's no way you're gonna forget it.
Right.
No way. But every single time you try to
I
remember it.
know.
Yeah.
And it's so
Yeah.
frustrating.
It's so frustrating. But my husband said to me, because what I do is I either have my notebook at the time. If I don't have my notebook,
Mhm.
then I have my phone.
Mhm.
And then I transfer it to the notebook. After the notebook, I actually type it in to a
Mhm.
Word document.
Right. So you have it.
So I have it. And that way, like if I need to go search something,
Mhm.
like a revelation on one of my children, for example, I
Mhm.
type in their name and it pulls
Oh,
up
that
all
is so
the
brilliant. I need
revelations
to do that.
that they have given me that he has given me about that particular child. And I can go, oh yeah,
Mm,
you can take a
that
pill
is
pill.
brilliant. I'm gonna do that.
Well, it came from my husband. That was one of the ideas. And it has been,
So I don't get it. Like in a Word document, do you have that kid's name?
no, I
What?
just have the date.
Oh.
And then I just type out the revelation.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing is I don't have just the date, but I have the time
Okay.
to kind of see
Mhm.
if there's a pattern
Right. In that.
in that. So it's been
Mhm.
kind of interesting to see. But it happens.
So you don't pull out the revelation of this kid and put it on anything
No.
specific. You
No.
just go through and look for their name.
I
Like,
type in the search bar
oh,
their name.
oh, and the search bar will tell you
Yeah.
where. Oh,
Because if you put find in a Word
Uh-huh.
document,
Like-
find,
okay.
however you do it, I
Mhm.
can show
Mhm.
you how to do
Okay. Yeah.
that.
Show me that. Mhm.
It's gonna take 2 of us.
Yes.
50-year-olds.
Yes. Exactly. All this technology.
Yes, technology.
Mhm.
But then you can pull up anything. Like, and let's say You have a question on what you should do about a calling. Well, you can pull up, you can type in the keyword and it
Calling,
pulls up.
and then it will pull up everything you've gotten on that.
Mhm.
It is so cool because it's
Yeah.
like you have your own personal set of
That's
scriptures
exactly what it is.
instead of like just your patriarchal blessing as
Exactly.
your personal set
And
of
that's how it
scriptures.
should be,
It should be.
because the pattern, the spirit does speak
Mhm.
in a lot of different ways, for
Right.
sure. But I believe eventually we have to get to the point where we're hearing his voice.
Mhm. For
And
ourselves.
for ourselves.
And not the prophet hearing his voice
Yes,
for us.
yes. And the thing is you can check it, sometimes you may wonder if that's coming from him or not. And
Right.
you can always check it against what the scriptures
Mhm.
and the prophets, and if it is gelling with what they're
Mhm.
saying, then it's 100%
Mhm.
revelation.
Mhm.
And that's why the prophet has said, you will not spiritually survive without it, because we are becoming we are living in a world where truth is like pliable.
Right. It's so skewed.
It's so skewed all the
Mhm.
time, and you don't know what's right or wrong.
What's up or down. It is
Exactly.
so confusing.
It's so confusing, but the Lord can talk to you and tell you,
Mhm.
even minute by minute,
Mhm.
what you're supposed to be doing. And I 100%, like I said, he is no respecter of persons.
I love that thought too.
And
I've heard that over and over again lately. And I just think it's special for me to realize he loves every single one of us the same. And if we want it and we desire it and we ask for it, we will get it.
Yeah. And his work in his glory, right, is to bring to pass our immortality in eternal life, to become like him.
That's his focus,
that's
his
what
job.
that's all
that
he
matters.
does.
Right.
Right. And so he wants to,
besides creating universes and stuff like that. I mean, yeah.
It's
just that
which is so crazy that he would want to speak to
us.
That's the crazy part. But that's probably the most favoriteest thing. I mean, don't you love having phone calls with your kids, like these full conversations where they're listening and you're listening? And it's just one of those things where if you think in that way, and Moses said, would to God that all the Lord's people were prophets in their own lives. And that really struck me, because I feel like if he is no respecter of persons, then we can have the same experiences as Nephi, as Moses, as Enoch, as all of these, but it's our unbelief that keeps us back from that. And the book has a lot of, it's kind of formulaic, because President Nelson in January of 2021 in the Liahona, he talked about all this stuff I'd been studying. He put it succinctly in one article, and it's growing into the principle of revelation. And as soon as he gave that article, I'm like, well, I don't know why do I need to write a book? I need to study. Yeah, exactly. And so it kind of had a formulaic, the Lord speaks to my husband a lot of times in formulas. And so it has a formula in there that if you do all of these things, then the result is personal revelation. So the other one that I struggled with, and this book came as a prompting, a revelation, you need to write a book in 2019, January, and call it Patterns of Revelation. And I thought, you are insane. Like, I haven't finished college. I'm a stay-at-home mom. Like, I have no business doing that. And I literally had to have my YSA kids help me format it, because I don't know any of that. Right. So this is literally like Nephi saying, okay, tell me where the tools are. I'll start from there. And I'll start building about. Yeah. And what really stuck out to me, I think, through all of this, and the other piece that most people are missing, is the family history part of it. Every time the prophet talks about receiving revelation, he always includes temple attendance and family history in it. Before I started doing temple and family history work, before Luana came into my life and out of my life in that quick moment, I didn't get it or understand it. But as I started doing family history and the veil started becoming thin for me, then revelation was flowing. It was like an open tap, where because of those experiences and because of the temple and everything else, then pure revelation also came in. I mean, I'm having dreams right now with names in them,
Mm.
and they end up being relatives and they need their work done.
So this isn't just getting on Family Search and saying, come up with 5 names for me,
Well, I mean,
or is it?
it can start that way for
Mhm.
sure.
Cause that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, and that's okay. And
That's
that's where
it.
it is. But that's where it starts. And
Mhm.
and when you start paying attention to the revelation, like when you're sitting in the temple and you get a certain prompting to that this person, maybe there's something different about this, then you go back and look at them and you realize they needed their family put in, they needed their family found.
Hmm.
And it opens this gate up, and I don't quite understand it. And maybe it's the part of the priesthood power in the generations, right?
Mhm.
That they are
Mhm.
they are using their priesthood power that you give them, because you
Mhm.
can't use priesthood power on yourself.
Mhm.
They're giving it to you in your life, because they're saying, all right, because they don't have food to worry about, right? They don't have jobs. They don't. So what are they going to use their priesthood power on?
Mhm.
You, right?
Mhm.
And especially if you're looking and wanting to be involved, it's like a light or a fly being attracted to a light, or a bug. When they know that someone is
Is
looking
listening.
and listening,
Mhm.
it will come to you like a flood.
Hmm. So
And-
you're finding these names, like, you know how to do that part of it.
Yeah, like it's literally just a name. And it's like, one of them was Nora Gillibrand,
Hmm.
right? The other one was Tammy McNichols. And the funny thing is, when I got Tammy McNichols, I'm like, there is no way that's a family history name. That's like an 80s high
Yeah,
hair name,
right.
right?
Yes, right. Very
But
high hair.
I looked, and sure enough, there's a Tammy McNichols in the system, and she needed her work done.
Hmm.
And I was related to her.
Hmm.
So there's a way for all of that to happen. And that's what I teach in Institute. I call it a gathering of Israel, but we're talking about, because in Joel, it talks about in the last days, your young men and old men will see dreams and have visions and all of those things. Well, why?
Right.
It's so that we can gather Israel. So if you're gathering and if you're a gatherer, first of all, you have no need to fear. Second of all, the veil becomes thin in ways that you never thought possible. And I have family members, I have dads, I have 2 children on the other side of the veil. And I have had some sweet experiences with them. Because how do you mother someone on the other side of the veil? You don't stop being their mom, right? And so through revelation, the Lord has just taught me so many things. Does it mean that I never have fear? No. I mean, that one thing,
That's just being a human.
it's just being
in
human.
mortality.
Exactly. And having that faith and trust in it. My husband's a lot better at faith than I am in the things that I've been told. But that's the cool thing, is we're working together. So I think the book is all about, like, it's all found in the scriptures and prophets. But basically it's pulled together the pattern that exists, and
it's something you need to study, not just read once. Like,
correct.
I need to go back
Yeah.
and study it. Like any formula, it's not just in your head
Right.
as soon as you read it.
Yeah. Well, and it's adjusting, because every person will have a different place in their life that they need to tweak, right? Because we're all different. But it's just whatever your tweak is in the pattern, you can have confidence that God will speak to you and he will give you his errand. And that has to do with parenting, that has to do with marriage, that has to do with callings, everything
that matters, really.
That matters. God will speak to you. And it will be in the night, it can be in the day, it can be through.
Did you find a pattern on the times when you were?
For me, yeah, it seemed to be more at night. But as I started like getting that and getting the cadence down, then it started coming to the day, because God can speak to anytime. And the interesting thing is, I teach my students in Institute about these dreams and the names and stuff. They are so awesome that they're sitting in class and they get a name come to their mind and they go and check it and they're related. So they're getting it in real time.
Wow.
And I don't know if this generation is just
amazing
in so many ways, but they don't have, I think, the traditions of their fathers that they have to overcome. Because I think sometimes we have been taught, oh, we don't if you do have these experiences, then you don't share them, or,
Right.
all of the traditions that we're trying to
Mhm.
get over. But
Mhm.
the prophet is begging and pleading with us to understand how to hear him. And it can come in different forms. It can come in promptings. It can come in a continual thought that happens over and over again.
Mhm.
But eventually it really needs to lead. The end part is hearing his voice and writing it down,
Yeah.
because that's really the ultimate way that, like, we hear so many things through revelation. And it's actually the pattern in the endowment when we go through. There's
Mhm.
so many things to learn, but if we're not receiving revelation, then it's so hard,
It's so
right?
hard.
It's just one of those things that is kind of absolutely necessary. And I believe our spiritual survival depends on the hearing him, but I think our family survival, our marriage survival, depends on not only hearing him, but being in the temple a lot,
Yeah.
a lot.
I've had the same kind of experiences, and I've been going every week for a while, and I'm one who didn't love the temple. I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
And I had a really hard time my first time I went in, and I felt anxious every time I went. I'm like, I'm going to do it wrong and someone's going to get mad at me. And it was just not good for
Yeah.
me. And just this past year, Heavenly Father has told me, you need to be in the temple once a week. And I
Yeah.
have been, I haven't missed a week.
Yeah.
When I go out of town, I go 2 times a week before, the week after. And there's a power that I'm just barely figuring
Tapping
out
into.
that you have already figured out. But that's where I was, I'm like, I cannot even get there, much less like once a week. When he said that, I was like, no,
I know.
no,
I know.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But, and you're just, what happens is as you go and you start to learn and feel the power that's there, you then tap into the power from your ancestors.
Mhm.
And then that causes so much more revelation to flow, because it's coming directly from someone who loves you and who is, and it's this really cool experience. And there are so many different experiences that people have, but it really comes under all one umbrella, and that's the Lord speaking to his children and getting us ready for his second coming. I mean, there is a reason why, the prophet has said over 50 times since he's been prophet, prepared for the second coming, prepared for the second coming. And he always, always, always includes temple in that temple and family history work, because they're temple, it's so awesome to go to the temple, but if you're not bringing family names, you're missing
a huge part
of that blessing of revelation. So, and as you include, and part of that revelation, when you get used to hearing his voice, he can tell you directly who you need to go focus on today in the temple, right? Who are the people? And a lot of times I feel like I've got, a father on the other side of the veil. And for me, the only way I was able to stay close to him was to be involved in something that he was involved in. And so I feel like he goes and teaches the lessons, and then he says, I know someone who will do your work. And then I get sent these dreams and all of the other things that have been happening to me.
Do you think that's your spiritual gift, or do you think that's possible for us? Like normal people.
100%.
Like normal people like me.
I wasn't getting that before I started doing temple and family history work. And it says nothing about it in my perishable blessing. But if you read about the spiritual gifts in Moroni and the Doctrine and Covenants and stuff, it talks about the discerning of spirits. It talks about the beholding of angels. So those are spiritual gifts that anyone can have, but because of our unbelief, we feel like we can't have them. Well, then God is a respecter of persons then.
Right.
If I can get it and you can't. But in this temple and spiritual foundation, the prophet talks about, if you go to the temple, you'll learn how to part the veil between heaven and earth. He wasn't saying just for Tia. That was to anyone and everyone who wanted to take him up on his promise. Exactly.
That's pretty powerful stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. And what is it?
We don't hear it.
No,
we don't hear it. That's why I loved your book. I was like, wait, I love books where I read them and I haven't heard this in a million conference talks, and you just say it in a way that's really powerful, I think, in your
Well,
book.
and they were pulled from it's all
doctrinal.
doctrine.
It's all the gospel.
Yeah, because
the
they didn't
doctrine
want
of
it to come
Christ.
from in fact, I
Right.
had a hard time putting in my experiences because I didn't want it to be Tia says, right? But I needed to provide examples in my life,
right,
where these things
I think
really
those are
do
the things that
happen.
help people, though.
Yeah.
You know, the examples,
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh, she's a real person.
Yeah.
She plays pickleball.
I know.
That means she's like a real person, like me.
Yes, and the hot mess like everybody else. But I think that's the whole crux of it, right? We're all hot messes, honestly.
Yes.
And
And this life is a mess.
but there's beauty in the imperfectness, and there's peace in the imperfectness. And this isn't about being perfect.
Right.
And for me, for a long time, I think a lot of times, because of the way I was raised in the divorce situation, I felt like I was always coming at it from a point of guilt, right? The gospel was guilt for me. It was, I got to do it, or I'm going to hell, like all of those things. And it was a checklist.
Right.
But in reality,
transactional.
Exactly. But in reality, it's just a father loving his children and just wanting to talk to him and wants them to come home. That's just all it is. And when I put all of those things behind me, and they still creep up from time to time, as they will, I'm able to like, oh, okay, that's right, I remember. And I go back to what I know, and I go back and search the revelations, and I go back. I mean, I have probably 5 or 6 notebooks now full of just messages from God. And they have become my most prized possession. They're my own set of personal scriptures, my own Liahona, right? And so everyone 100% can receive revelation. They just have to do the prophet says, the spiritual work necessary.
Right.
And if you're willing to do that, then dreams and visions and all or other sorts of revelation can be yours. And I 100% testify of that the formula does work, and that he does love us, and that revelation will flow into your life in ways you can't even imagine. And this is coming from a little girl from a divorced family who had so many traumatic experiences, even before I was married. And then after I was married, so many more. Right. But I'm able to overcome that most of the time because of an eternal set of parents and a brother who just loves me and is patient with me. And that's 100% how he feels about everyone. So, yeah.
Just a last thought. I feel like for so long, I thought this stuff was all happening to me.
Sure.
Right. All of it.
Yeah.
And now I feel like it happened for me.
Right.
Is that how you feel?
Yeah. I would say most of the time.
Yeah. Most of the time.
I would say that, I don't think I would have learned what I have learned.
Right. I don't think I would have either.
And I think that's the pattern, right? He gives us line upon line, precept upon precept. And if we trust in him in everything, not just what we think, but everything, that there is something to learn in all of it. And really what it comes down to is we're trying to become like them. Right. And who are we to think that we shouldn't have hard things and yet make it to where they're at? Right. I thought of that often, like bring it, because I want to be standing next to you sometime. I want to be worthy to be able to be in your presence. Yeah. And that's really what revelation leads to. That's what the endowment leads to. And that's what they're teaching, is the brother of Jared experience, right? Is coming back into their presence. And the interesting thing is that in the temple, nowhere does it mention death. And yet we put off that promise, right? Till the celestial world or whatever. But the reality is we can have it now. And we need it now. Exactly. And then when the prophet says the greatest manifestations that have ever been are still coming, that. Do we even grasp what that
No,
means.
I was like, for other people, I'm sure that's true. That's what
but
I was
it's-
thinking.
It's ready for us. I
Mhm.
mean, the things that are coming are the city of Enoch. Like we
Mhm.
get to hang out with translated beings.
Mhm.
How cool is that, right?
Doesn't get cooler.
It doesn't get cooler, but it starts with that basic
Mhm.
hearing his voice, having him lead you line upon line, precept upon precept, accepting his will in all things,
Mhm.
because you will get prompted to do things you don't
You
want
don't
to
want to do, that's the majority of the time. That's
Yeah.
why I know it's coming from him.
because it's against the natural man.
It is.
Yes.
And it's scary.
It's
And it takes
scary.
courage and all of it.
But as you get these experiences with the Lord, and as you walk this path with the Lord, he elevates you and gives you assurance that you can have faith in the next hard thing and the next hard thing
Mhm.
and the next hard thing. And it's just a whole bunch of chains
Mhm.
formed together of these experiences of trusting in the Lord and having it work out. But you cannot put a timetable on it. You can't,
That's the
it's
tricky
not a
part.
vending machine that you can say, okay, I'm doing this, now give me that.
Mhm.
You've got to trust in whatever the timetable is and what it looks like.
Yeah.
So, and I think as humans, that's a hard thing to do, especially in an instant
Yep.
society. But, I prayed this morning that he would open my mouth to just be able to testify of these things. And
Mhm.
that's what this really is about, is
Mhm.
all of us getting experience and testifying, so that the next person can have courage and the next person can have courage, because it's not just about prophets
Mhm.
and general women's authorities. It's about you and me, sitting in your office,
Mhm.
having this conversation and testifying to all of those out there
Mhm.
who have had lives that aren't storybook, that it's going to be okay
Mhm.
if you include God in it
Mhm.
and you learn how to hear him. So
Oh, that was so good, Tia. Thank you so much for
you're
being here.
welcome. It's fun. This is my first podcast.
And isn't she amazing? Now she's going to have a million more, but thank
Oh,
you so
it's
much
fun.
for
You're
being
welcome.
here.
You're welcome.
It was wonderful. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. And remember, seek and expect miracles. And we'll see you next time.